The champagne flute in my sister's hand trembled just slightly, catching the warm golden light of the reception hall. But it wasn't nerves. Vivian didn't get nervous. Not in rooms like this. Not when she had an audience. And right now, she had all of them. Before the happy couple cuts their cake, her voice flowed through the speakers. My speakers. The ones Nathan and I had spent hours choosing so our first dance would sound perfect. Just like that, the room shifted. Conversations softened, heads turned, forks paused mid-air. And in the span of a single sentence, my wedding stopped being about me. Derek and I have something special to share. My stomach dropped so fast it felt like the floor disappeared beneath me. Not surprise, never surprise, just recognition. That same tone, that same calculated sweetness wrapped around something sharp. I felt Nathan's fingers tighten around mine under the table, grounding me, steady and warm. But even that couldn't stop the familiar wave rising in my chest. Because I knew. I didn't know exactly what she was about to do, but I knew it wouldn't be small. Vivian never did small. 3 hours. That's all I got. 3 hours of being the bride. 3 hours of being seen, celebrated, centered. And now, like every other milestone in my life, it was slipping through my fingers while she smiled like she owned it. Derek stepped forward then, right into the center of the dance floor we had cleared for our cake cutting. My cake, my moment. And then, like something out of a perfectly staged performance, he dropped to one knee. The room gasped. Loud, sharp, electric. Phones came out instantly, like muscle memory. Chairs scraped. My photographer, who I had booked, a year in advance, who I had paid more than I wanted to admit, pivoted away from me so fast it almost felt personal, her camera locking onto them like they were the reason she was there. Vivian Elizabeth Cross. Derek's voice boomed. Through the speakers, confident, rehearsed, proud. Will you marry me? And just like that, it happened. Yes! Vivian squealed, the sound piercing, dramatic, perfectly timed as she bounced in place, her almost white dress flaring slightly as she moved. Another thing she had compromised on. Another boundary she had quietly crossed. Yes, yes, yes! Applause erupted, but it wasn't clean, it wasn't unified. Some people clapped instinctively, caught up in the moment. Others hesitated, glancing toward me and Nathan like they were waiting for permission to react. Confusion spread through the room like a ripple. Because even if no one said it out loud, everyone felt it. This wasn't right. But Vivian didn't care about right. She cared about attention. And she had it. Every eye, every lens, every whispered comment. She turned slightly, just enough to face our table, lifting her hand so the ring caught the light, her lips curving into that same small, victorious smile I had seen my entire life. That smile that said, I win. Again. And sitting there, in my wedding dress, surrounded by flowers I had chosen, decorations I had planned, people I had invited, I felt something inside me go very, very still. Not anger, not yet. Something quieter. Heavier, like a door closing. Because this wasn't just about tonight. This was 28 years of moments, big and small, where I had been pushed just slightly, out of frame so she could step into focus. And for a second, just 1 second, I thought about standing up, about grabbing the microphone back, about saying something, anything, that would pull the attention back where it belonged. But I didn't. Because deep down, I already knew something she didn't, something no one else in that room knew yet. This moment, this perfect, attention-stealing, spotlight hijacking moment, it wasn't her victory. It was her mistake, the biggest one she had ever made. And she made it in front of 200 people, because across the room, Lucas Chun was already standing. And when Lucas stood up like that, slow, deliberate, completely in control. It wasn't impulsive. It wasn't emotional. It meant one thing. Something was about to happen. Well, his voice cut clean through the noise, not loud, but precise, sharp enough to slice through conversations, through applause, through confusion. The room quieted almost instantly. "Since we're sharing announcements tonight." The way he said it made something shift in the air. People turned. Fully now. Attention redirecting again, but this time not to Vivian. To him. To whatever was coming next. "I think it's time for my speech." There was something in his tone. Calm, controlled, but underneath it, something heavier, something intentional. And for the first time since she walked into my wedding, I saw it. The smallest crack in Vivian's expression. Her smile didn't disappear, but it tightened. Just slightly. Just enough that if you knew her, if you had spent your whole life watching her perform, you'd recognize it. Uncertainty. "Oh, Lucas, maybe later." She started lightly, trying to keep it playful, to keep control. "Sit down, Vivian." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. And just like that, the room went completely still. My heart started pounding, not with panic, but with something else. Something building. Something I hadn't felt in a long time when it came to her. Anticipation. Because to understand why that moment mattered, why the room felt like it, was holding its breath. You need to understand something about Vivian. About me. About what it's like to grow up in the shadow of someone who doesn't just want to shine, but needs to be the only light in the room. Vivian was born when I was 2 years old, but somehow it always felt like my life started the day she arrived. Not because I stopped existing, but because I stopped mattering in the same way. She was the miracle baby, the one my parents thought they'd never have. The story was told so many times it practically became family mythology. How the doctors had said it was unlikely. How my mother had cried when she found out she was pregnant. Again, how Vivian came into the world like some kind of answered prayer. And from the moment she opened her blue eyes, everything shifted. People didn't just love her, they adored her. Strangers would stop my mom in grocery stores just to comment on her curls, her smile, her perfect little face. Meanwhile, I stood beside them, quiet, holding onto a cart or a hand, already learning what it felt like to be background noise. And maybe it wouldn't have shaped me the way it did if Vivian had just been naturally loved. But that wasn't enough for her. It never was. She didn't just want attention. She needed all of it. Completely. Constantly. And if she had to take it from someone else to get it, she would. Without hesitation. Without guilt. Without even seeming to realize what she was doing was wrong. The first time I truly understood that wasn't when we were teenagers. It wasn't even in middle school. It was 5th grade. I had spent weeks preparing for the spelling bee. I remember sitting at the kitchen table every night, index cards spread out in messy piles, whispering words under my breath while my mom cooked dinner. For once, something felt like it was mine. Not shared, not compared. Mine. And when they called my name as the winner, something lit up inside me, something small but powerful. Pride. Real pride. The kind that doesn't come from being noticed, but from knowing you earned something. I remember looking out into the crowd, searching for my parents, and seeing them smiling. Really smiling. For me. And then Vivian told everyone I cheated. Just like that. No build-up, no hesitation. She had the words written on her hand, she whispered to a group of kids, loud enough that it spread, fast and ugly. I didn't. Of course I didn't. But it didn't matter, because Vivian didn't just say things. She sold them. She looked believable, sounded convincing. And within a day, the win didn't feel like a win anymore. It felt tainted, smaller, like something I had to defend instead of celebrate. That was the first time something was taken from me like that. But it wasn't the last. By the time we got to high school, the pattern was so established it almost felt predictable. When I made varsity soccer after years of practice, early mornings, and pushing myself harder than I thought I could, Vivian suddenly discovered a passion for the sport. She didn't try out the same way I did. She didn't grind. She didn't struggle. She networked. She charmed. She positioned herself perfectly until she landed JV captain, not because she was the best player, but because she knew how to make people believe she was essential. And just like that, conversations shifted again. It wasn't Sophie made varsity. It was both sisters are doing so well. Balanced, equalized, neutralized. And I started to notice something else too. It wasn't just about sharing the spotlight. It was about controlling it. If she couldn't outdo me directly, she would redirect attention. If she couldn't win, she would make the win feel smaller, less special, less mine. And the worst part? No one ever called it out. Because on the surface, it didn't look malicious. It looked like coincidence, like enthusiasm, like a younger sister looking up to her older one. College didn't change anything. If anything, it made it worse. Getting into Columbia for pre-med was one of the hardest things I had ever worked for. Late nights, endless exams, constant pressure, it felt like everything I had been building toward. And for a moment, when that acceptance letter came in, I let myself feel it fully. The excitement, the relief, the sense that maybe, finally, I had carved out something that was completely my own. A new city, a new chapter, a space where I wasn't just Vivian's sister. And then she applied to NYU, not because it was her dream, not because it aligned with her goals, but because she couldn't stand the idea of me being somewhere she wasn't. Same city, same social circles, same orbit. And suddenly, even in a place as big as New York, I wasn't separate. I wasn't independent. I was still part of her narrative. It's not a competition, my mom would always say whenever tension bubbled to the surface. She said it gently, like repeating it enough times would make it true. Like ignoring the pattern would somehow erase it. My dad stayed quieter about it, but his silence felt like agreement. Or maybe just avoidance. Either way, the message was clear. This wasn't something we talked about. It wasn't something we confronted. It was just how things were, and over time I adapted. Not in the way Vivian did, strategically, deliberately, but in a quieter, more internal way. I lowered my expectations. I celebrated things privately. I learned not to rely on moments staying mine for long. And maybe that's why, when it came to the biggest moments of my life, the ones that should have felt untouchable, I already carried a quiet, underlying fear. Because by the time I got engaged to Nathan, I didn't just hope for a perfect wedding. I braced for interference, and Vivian didn't disappoint. It started subtly, almost harmlessly. Comments about my venue being nice but a little safe. Suggestions about color palettes that would photograph better. Little remarks about how certain choices didn't quite match the vision of a modern wedding. At first, I brushed it off, smiled, nodded, let it slide. Because I didn't want to start something. Not this time, not over this. But then she called my venue, behind my back. Pretending to confirm details, she asked about alternate dates that just so happened to conflict with something she had planned. When the coordinator called me to clarify, confusion in her voice, I felt something snap. Not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly, deep inside. Because it wasn't just a suggestion anymore. It wasn't just commentary. It was interference. Direct, intentional interference in something that was supposed to be mine. I remember sitting on the floor of my apartment that night, surrounded by swatches, invitations, seating charts, All the pieces of a wedding I had imagined for years, and, feeling completely disconnected from it, my phone kept lighting up with messages from her. What if we moved the cake cutting later? Have you considered a different entrance song? I just think it could be more elevated. And with every message, it felt less like planning my wedding and more like defending it. And that's when I broke. Not in a way anyone would notice. No shouting, no dramatic outburst, just silent tears slipping down my face while I stared at a future moment that already felt like it was being taken from me. Nathan found me like that. He didn't rush to fix it, didn't throw out solutions or tell me to ignore her. He just sat beside me, steady and calm, and took my hand. And in that quiet moment, I admitted something I hadn't wanted to say out loud. "She's going to ruin it," I whispered. "I don't know how yet, but she will." Nathan didn't respond right away. But the next day, Lucas did, and that's when everything started to change. Lucas didn't come to me with excitement. He didn't come with drama or curiosity or even sympathy. When Nathan told him what was happening, he just listened, quietly, carefully, like he was filing everything away somewhere behind his eyes. And the next evening, when we were all sitting in our apartment, surrounded by half-packed wedding supplies and unopened boxes, he finally spoke. "Do you want this to stop?" That was it. No build-up, no explanation, just one question that felt heavier than anything anyone had asked me before. Because it wasn't really a question about Vivian. It was a question about me, about what I was willing to do, about whether I was ready to stop being the person who absorbed everything and said nothing. I remember looking at him, trying to read his expression, but there was nothing obvious there. No judgment, no push, just calm certainty. Like whatever decision I made, he already knew how it would end. "What do you mean?" I asked, even though something deep down already understood. Lucas leaned back slightly, folding his hands together, his voice steady. "People like your sister don't stop on their own. Not because they're evil, but because they've never had to. No consequences, no exposure. No one challenges the narrative they create." He paused just long enough for the words to settle. But narratives fall apart when facts get involved. The room went quiet. Nathan didn't interrupt, didn't soften it, because he knew exactly what Lucas was offering, and more importantly, he trusted him. "I do corporate intelligence," Lucas continued, almost casually, "which is just a polite way of saying I find things people don't want found. Financial histories, legal inconsistencies, patterns of behavior. Everyone leaves a trail, Sophie. Your sister won't be any different." My chest tightened. Not out of fear, but out of something sharper. Something I hadn't let myself feel before. Control. The possibility of it. "I don't want to ruin her life," I said finally, my voice quieter than I expected. And for the first time, Lucas gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. "That's the right instinct," he said. "But there's a difference between ruining someone's life and letting them face the truth of what they've done." I swallowed hard, my mind racing. Because this wasn't hypothetical anymore. This wasn't venting or complaining or hoping things would magically get better. This was action. Real. Irreversible action. "And what happens if you find something?" I asked. Lucas held my gaze, completely unflinching. "Then we decide what to do with it. Not he. Not I. We." That word mattered more than anything else he said. I didn't answer right away. I thought about every moment, every time I had swallowed, my feelings to keep the peace. Every achievement that had been twisted, minimized, or overshadowed. Every time I had convinced myself it wasn't a big deal, just to avoid conflict. And then I thought about my wedding. The one day that was supposed to be different. The one day I had quietly hoped might finally be mine. And I realized something that scared me more than anything Lucas was suggesting. If I didn't do something, now, nothing would ever change. Not for me, not for her, not for us. Okay, I said, my voice steady despite everything building inside me. Do it. Lucas didn't smile, didn't react with satisfaction or excitement. He just nodded once, like a switch had been flipped. After that, something strange happened. For a while, things got better. Or at least they looked like they did. Vivian pulled back. The constant stream of suggestions slowed. The passive-aggressive comments disappeared. When we went dress shopping, she complimented me. Actually complimented me. Said the dress looked perfect, said I looked beautiful. And for a brief, dangerous moment, I let myself believe it. I let myself think maybe I had been wrong. Maybe she had grown up. Maybe she had finally reached a point where she didn't need to compete anymore. It was a comforting thought, easy, soft, the kind of lie you want to believe because the truth is too exhausting to keep carrying. But there were cracks, small ones. The way she asked certain questions, too casually. The way she lingered on details that didn't matter unless you were planning something. The way her smile sometimes felt just slightly too practiced. And then there was the dress. When she showed up to the final fitting in that almost white shade, brushing it off as champagne with a light laugh, I felt that quiet voice in the back of my mind speak again. She hasn't changed. She's waiting. Lucas didn't update me often. Weeks would pass with nothing, no messages, no hints. And then occasionally I'd catch him watching Vivian at family dinners, not obviously, not suspiciously, but with that same analytical focus he had when he first asked me that question. Like he was connecting pieces I couldn't see yet. Once, I pulled him aside in the kitchen, my heart beating faster than I wanted to admit. "Did you find anything?" I asked. He didn't answer immediately, just poured himself a drink, calm as ever. "Enough," he said finally. My stomach dropped. Enough for what? He met my eyes then, and there was something different there. Not anger, not excitement, just certainty. Enough for her to never do this to you again. I should have asked more questions. I should have demanded details, drawn lines, set boundaries. But I didn't. Because part of me didn't want to know. Part of me trusted that whatever Lucas was doing, it was necessary. And part of me, if I'm being completely honest, wanted it. Wanted there to finally be a moment where Vivian didn't walk away untouched. Where the balance shifted, even just a little. So I let it happen. I focused on the wedding, on the details, on Nathan, on building something that felt real and solid and mine. And then the day came. The ceremony was perfect, calm, intimate, everything I had hoped for. For those moments, standing there, saying my vows, feeling Nathan's hands steady in mine, it felt like nothing else existed. Not Vivian. Not the past, not the tension, just us. And when we walked back down the aisle as husband and wife, people, cheering, music swelling, something inside me loosened. Maybe this would be enough. Maybe this part, this core memory would stay untouched no matter what happened next. But weddings don't end at the ceremony. They shift, they open up, they create space for everything else to happen. And as the reception started, as the music picked up and conversations grew louder and the structure of the evening softened, I saw her again, really saw her. Moving through the crowd like she belonged at the center of it, laughing a little too brightly, holding Derek's arm just a little too tightly, waiting. And that quiet voice came back one last time. This isn't over. And then, She picked up the microphone. The second Lucas said, "Sit down, Vivian." Something shifted in the room so completely it almost felt physical, like the air pressure had dropped. Conversations died mid-sentence. Glasses hovered halfway to lips. Even the band, sensing something they didn't understand, slowly faded into silence. Vivian didn't sit. Of course she didn't. She laughed instead, a light, airy sound that would have worked in any other situation. "Lucas, don't be dramatic," she said, adjusting the ring on her finger like this was still her moment, like she could still steer it back. But I saw it. I saw the flicker behind her eyes. The calculation, the sudden awareness that she wasn't in control anymore. And Lucas, he didn't move, didn't react. He just lifted his glass slightly, like he was about to give the most ordinary speech in the world. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, calm, measured, completely unshaken. "I've known Nathan for 15 years. His voice carried effortlessly through the room, every word landing exactly where it needed to. I've watched him become the kind of man people trust, the kind of man people rely on. And today, he married someone who matches him in every possible way." He turned slightly, looking at me. Not performative, not exaggerated, just real. "Sophie is the kind of person who shows up. Not when it's convenient, not when it benefits her, but always. For her friends, her patients, her family." My throat tightened unexpectedly, emotion catching me off guard in the middle of everything. Unraveling. "But tonight," he continued, shifting his gaze slowly back toward Vivian, "we witnessed something interesting." The word interesting hung in the air like a warning. "An engagement announcement at someone else's wedding," Lucas said, tilting his head slightly, "is generally considered tacky." A few uncomfortable laughs broke out, short, nervous, quickly swallowed. Vivian's smile tightened. "Desperate," he added calmly. Another ripple through the crowd. "But what makes tonight truly special?" He paused, just long enough for every eye to lock back onto him. "Is that this isn't even Vivian's first engagement." The silence that followed was deafening. It didn't feel like a wedding anymore. It felt like something else entirely. Something sharper, heavier. Derek turned his head slowly toward Vivian, confusion already forming on his face. "What?" he said under his breath, but the microphone picked it up just enough for people nearby to hear. Lucas reached into his jacket, pulling out his phone with deliberate slowness. Not rushed, not dramatic, controlled. "Actually," he continued, tapping the screen, "it's not her second either." A photo appeared on the large screen behind the dance floor, the one we had set up for our wedding slideshow. Except this wasn't part of the plan. This was something else. A man, well-dressed, smiling, his arm around Vivian, a ring clearly visible on her finger. "Fiancé number 1, Lucas said. "Harrison Wells, engaged in 2018. Murmurs spread instantly, sharp and fast. Vivian's entire posture changed. "You don't know what you're talking about," she snapped, her voice losing that polished sweetness for the first time. "Sit down, Vivian," Lucas repeated, not louder, but firmer, final. Engagement ended, he continued, swiping to the next image, when his family discovered that Vivian had been selling private stories about them to gossip blogs. A collective gasp swept through the room. Not polite, not controlled, raw, real. Derek took a step back. Just one, but it was enough. Enough to create distance. Enough to show the first crack. "That's not true," Vivian shot back, but now there was something else in her voice. Not confidence. Not control. Panic. "Fiancé number 2, Lucas went on, already moving forward before she could recover. Another photo. Another man. Another ring. Marcus Rivera, tech entrepreneur, engaged in 2020. The room felt like it was shrinking, Every person leaning in caught between disbelief and morbid curiosity. That engagement ended, Lucas said, his tone never changing, when Marcus discovered that Vivian had been secretly recording their therapy sessions. A beat. For leverage. Someone actually said, "Oh my God," out loud. Loud enough that it echoed. Vivian's face had lost all color now. "Those were private matters," she snapped, her voice rising, cracking at the edges. "You can't just—" "I can," Lucas interrupted, calm and precise. "And I am." Derek looked like he couldn't breathe. His eyes moved between Vivian and the screen, trying to process something that clearly didn't make sense in his version of reality. "Vivian," he said quietly. But she didn't look at him. She couldn't. Because she knew. She knew exactly where this was going. And for the first time in her life, she couldn't stop it. "And then," Lucas said, his voice dropping just slightly, enough to pull everyone in even closer, "we get to fiancé number 3. The room stilled again, completely. "James Morrison," he said. "Christmas, 2021. Another image flashed up, Vivian, glowing, another ring, another performance. "That engagement," Lucas continued, "ended for a very specific reason." He paused, and this time the silence wasn't just anticipation. It was dread. Because Vivian was already married. Everything exploded at once. Gasps, voices, chairs scraping. The sound hit all at once like a wave crashing into the room. "You're lying!" Vivian shouted, her voice sharp, desperate, completely stripped of its usual polish. But Lucas didn't even look at her this time. He just read from his phone. "Las Vegas, June 15th, 2019. Marriage to Bradley Kumar." He lifted his gaze slowly, scanning the room. Annulment filed 6 weeks later. Another pause. But never finalized. The words landed like a hammer. "Which means," Lucas finished, "legally speaking, Vivian has been married this entire time." Derek's reaction was instant, violent in its suddenness. He ripped the ring off her finger so fast she let out a sharp cry, stumbling slightly in her heels. "You told me you'd never been married," he said, his voice low but shaking with something dangerous. Hurt, rage, betrayal all tangled together. "Derek, I can explain—" "Explain what?" he snapped, stepping back again, creating more space, more distance, like he physically couldn't stand near her anymore. And for once, Vivian didn't have the words. "But wait," Lucas said, raising a hand slightly, not to prolong it for drama, but because he wasn't finished. "There's one more thing." The room barely made a sound now. People weren't just watching. They were locked in. "Bradley Kumar," Lucas said clearly, "is actually here tonight." A ripple of confusion passed through the crowd. "Table 12, he added. "Bradley, would you mind standing up?" And for a second, nothing happened. Then a man, mid-30s, slightly awkward, clearly overwhelmed, slowly stood up, giving a small, uncertain wave. Hi," he said into the silence. "Vivian, we should probably talk about those papers." That was it. That was the breaking point. Vivian didn't argue, didn't defend herself, didn't try to spin it. She turned and ran, actually ran. Heels hitting the floor hard and uneven, dress catching slightly as she pushed through the crowd, people stepping back instinctively as she moved past them. No grace, no control, no performance, just escape. The doors slammed behind her, and for a moment, no one moved, no one spoke. And then Lucas raised his glass again, like this had always been part of the plan. "To Sophie and Nathan," he said, his tone returning to something almost warm. "May your marriage be built on truth, respect, and the understanding that weddings are about the couple getting married." A small pause. not the siblings who can't stand not being the center of attention. This time, the applause came slowly, but it grew, stronger, louder, real, not confused. Not forced, earned, and sitting there, in the center of it all, I finally felt it. Not anger, not vindication, something deeper, something steadier. For the first time in my life, she didn't take the moment from me. She gave it back. Court day had finally arrived, and I won't lie, my breathing was completely out of control. Even after planning everything so carefully, there was still this fear inside me. What if everything went wrong? What if she pulled some last-minute stunt? But then I remembered all those nights, the humiliation, the betrayal, and something inside me said, there's no turning back now. When we walked into the courtroom, she was already there, sitting calmly, completely composed, like she had done nothing wrong. Her parents were with her, and the way they looked at me made it seem like I was the villain. For a second, anger hit me, but I stayed quiet. This time I wasn't here to react. I was here to expose the truth. The case began, and she repeated her usual story. I was toxic, controlling, abusive. There was so much confidence in her voice that if I didn't know the truth, I might have doubted myself. Even the judge seemed to take her seriously at first, and honestly, my hands started to go cold. Then it was my turn. I didn't say much. I just gave a signal to my lawyer. He calmly pulled out a folder and placed it in front of the judge. Your Honor, we would like to present evidence. The moment those words were spoken, her expression changed, just slightly. But I noticed. First piece of evidence, screenshots, her messages, her planning, her fake stories. A strange silence filled the courtroom. Then came the second piece, an audio recording. As it played, her voice was crystal clear, talking to her friend about how she would manipulate me and gain sympathy. In that moment, her confidence shattered. She tried to interrupt. This is taken out of context. But no one was listening anymore. The judge told her to stay quiet and let the recording finish. With every second, her mask kept falling apart. And for the first time, I saw fear in her eyes. And then came the final blow. Video evidence. The moment it appeared on the screen, everything became clear. Her act, her fake victim narrative, completely exposed. People in the courtroom were looking at each other in disbelief, like they couldn't process how someone could be this calculated. The judge called for a short break, and during that moment, she looked at me. For the first time, without attitude. There was only one thing in her eyes, panic, but it was too late. When the hearing resumed, the decision was clear. All her claims were dismissed, and legal action against her was ordered. The same game she tried to play with me had now turned against her. As I walked out of that courtroom, I didn't feel victory. There was no celebration, just a strange sense of relief, like a heavy weight had finally been lifted. The revenge was complete. But more importantly, the truth had finally come out. And that day, I learned something. Sometimes patience is the most powerful form of revenge.